The wind came down from the mountains like a dying prayer, carrying with it the scent of snow that had not yet fallen, and the memory of warmth that would not return. November in Wyoming Territory meant short days, and long shadows meant frost that turned the grass to silver razors, meant nights so cold a man could watch his breath turn to ice before it reached the ground. Jacob Turner stood on the hill behind his ranch house, staring at the grave that held nothing. 6 feet of Wyoming dirt. A wooden cross he had carved himself, with hands that shook so badly he had cut his thumb twice. His wife's name burned into the wood with a hot poker because he could not afford a stone marker. Ella Catherine Turner, beloved wife and mother, taken from us too soon. But she was not there. Her body had never been found. The wagon had been burned. The bodies of the 2 ranch hands who accompanied her had been stripped and mutilated in the Apache way left for the crows and the coyotes. But Ella's body was simply gone, vanished like smoke, like a dream that fades the moment you open your eyes. 7 months had passed since the attack. 7 months since the supply run to Fort Laramie that should have taken 3 days. 7 months since Jacob had climbed this same hill and seen the black smoke rising against the blue sky like a curse. 7 months since his world had ended. The newspapers had called it a massacre. Another tragedy in the endless war between civilization and savagery. They wrote as if those words meant anything to the children who woke up crying for their mother every night. As if those words could fill the emptiness that had taken root in this house like a cancer. General Crook was still hunting the Apache bands through Arizona and New Mexico. Geronimo's name was whispered in every settlement from Texas to Montana. The Chiricahua were ghosts in the desert, striking without warning, disappearing like morning mist. And somewhere out there among those warriors were the men who had killed Ella Turner. Jacob had thought about revenge. God knew he had thought about it, had dreamed about it with a clarity that frightened him. But what good was revenge when you had 4 children who needed feeding? What good was a dead Apache warrior when your daughter still called for her mama in the middle of the night? He heard the voices before he saw them, high and shrill, cutting through the morning air like the cries of wounded animals. "It's mine. You took it. Give it back." That was Thomas, 11 years old and full of rage he did not know how to name. The boy had been sweet once, quick to laugh, always following his older brother like a shadow. Now he was all sharp edges and sudden violence, getting into fights at school, breaking things for the pleasure of watching them shatter. "I didn't take nothing. You're a liar." Samuel 14. His voice already dropping into the lower registers of manhood, but still carrying the crack of boyhood pain. Samuel, who had stopped speaking for 3 weeks after Ella died. Samuel, who had begged to go with his mother that day and been told, "No, you need to stay and help your father." Samuel, who blamed himself with a ferocity that no words could touch. Jacob turned from the grave and looked down at his house. Smoke rose from the chimney, gray and listless. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. The corral fence had 3 broken posts he had been meaning to fix for 2 months. The whole place looked like a wound that refused to heal. He started down the hill, his boots crunching through the frozen grass. His head pounded. He had drunk too much whiskey the night before. He drank too much whiskey every night before. It was the only way he could sleep, and even then he did not sleep well. In his dreams, Ella was always dying. In his dreams, he was always too late. The kitchen was chaos incarnate. Thomas stood on one side of the table, his face red with fury, a wooden spoon clutched in his fist like a weapon. Samuel faced him from the other side, taller, broader, but with that same helpless rage burning in his eyes. Between them, Lily sat at the table, her thin shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She was 8 years old and had not spoken above a whisper since her mother died. The doctor in Cheyenne said it was shock that it would pass. But 3 months had gone by, and Lily's voice had not returned, as if grief had stolen it permanently. In the corner, strapped into the high chair that Jacob had built when she was born, 2-year-old Sarah wailed with the kind of desperation that only babies possess, the kind that says the world has ended and no one is coming to fix it. Her face was red and streaked with tears and snot. She had thrown her breakfast on the floor, a mess of congealed oatmeal that now decorated the floorboards like abstract art. Enough. Jacob's voice cut through the noise like an axe through kindling. The boys froze. Lily's sobs caught in her throat. Even Sarah's crying faltered for a moment before resuming at a lower, more uncertain volume. What happened? It was not a question. Jacob was too tired for questions. "He took my spoon," Thomas said, his voice tight with the kind of righteousness only children can muster. "I was trying to make breakfast, and he took my spoon." "It was on the floor," Samuel shot back. "Everything's on the floor. This whole place is a disaster." Jacob looked around the kitchen. Samuel was not wrong. Flour dusted the table and the floor like snow. Broken eggshells crunched under his boots. A pot of something burned sat on the stove smoke, curling from its blackened edges. The smell was acrid and wrong, like hair burning. 3 days' worth of dishes were piled in the wash basin. The window over the sink was so dirty you could barely see through it. "What were you trying to make?" "Pancakes," Thomas said, and suddenly his voice was small and broken, like Mama used to make. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Lily's shoulders began shaking again. Samuel turned away, his jaw clenched so tight Jacob could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. Thomas stared at the spoon in his hand as if he no longer recognized it, as if it had transformed into something alien and incomprehensible. Sarah mercifully had stopped crying. She looked at Jacob with her mother's eyes, blue as summer sky, and said the word that broke him every single morning: "Mama." Jacob crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, lifted Sarah from the high chair and held her against his chest. Her small body radiated warmth, and she smelled of milk and the faint sweetness of sleep, and that indefinable sweetness that all babies carry. She buried her face in his neck and said it again, quieter this time, more uncertain, as if she was beginning to understand that this word no longer summoned the person it was meant to. "Mama. Mama's not here, sweetheart." He hated himself for saying it, hated the way Sarah's body went rigid against his, hated the way her breath hitched. He hated that he had to say it at all. He hated that it was true. Samuel moved to the stove and pulled the burned pot away from the heat. His movements were mechanical, devoid of the easy grace he had once possessed. Everything the boy did now was careful and controlled, as if he were afraid that one wrong move might shatter what little remained of their family. Thomas set the spoon down on the table with exaggerated care, as if it were made of glass. His hands were shaking. Jacob noticed with a pang that the boy's knuckles were scraped raw. Another fight. Another trip to the schoolhouse where Mrs. Henderson would look at Jacob with pity and disappointment in equal measure. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and tried to smile at him, but it came out crooked and sad, a ghost of the bright joy she used to radiate like sunlight. She had been the happiest child Jacob had ever known. Now she moved through the house like a whisper, barely there, barely real. "I'll make something," Jacob said, his voice rough. "Give me a minute." He settled Sarah back into her chair and turned to the pantry. There was not much left. Oats, some dried beef that was more leather than meat, a half-wheel of cheese that had seen better days, its edges going green with mold, a sack of flour with weevils in it. He had been meaning to ride into town for supplies, but the days kept slipping away from him like water through his fingers. Time had become strange since Ella died. Hours felt like minutes. Days felt like hours. Weeks vanished entirely. He made oatmeal thick and plain with no cinnamon or honey or cream. He dumped it into bowls and set them on the table. The children ate in silence, their spoons scraping against their bowls with a sound like digging graves. No one looked at anyone else. No one spoke. They had become strangers living in the same house, bound together by nothing but shared loss and the animal need to survive. Samuel ate mechanically, his eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance that only he could see. Thomas pushed his oatmeal around his bowl without actually eating much of it. Lily took tiny bites, each one seeming to require enormous effort. Sarah made a mess, as 2-year-olds do, but at least she ate. When breakfast was over, Samuel stood and began clearing the dishes without being asked. He had taken on more and more responsibilities since Ella died, as if he could somehow hold the family together through sheer force of will. He washed dishes. He helped Thomas with homework. He changed Sarah's diapers when Jacob was too drunk or too broken to manage it. He was 14 years old and acting like a man of 40, and it was killing something inside him. Thomas went outside to tend to the horses. The boy had always been good with animals, gentle in a way he was no longer gentle with people. The horses did not judge him. The horses did not expect him to be anything other than what he was. Lily took Sarah's hand and led her to the corner where the toys were kept, wooden blocks and a rag doll that had been Ella's when she was a girl, its face faded from years of love. Lily arranged the blocks carefully, building a small house, then knocking it down, then building it again. Sarah watched with solemn attention, occasionally adding a block in the wrong place, disrupting the pattern. Jacob stood at the window and watched the sun climb higher over the eastern ridge. The light was thin and cold. It did not warm anything. Beyond the fence line, the prairie stretched away toward the mountains, brown and dead, waiting for snow that would bury everything. He thought about the advertisement he had placed in the Cheyenne newspaper 2 weeks ago. Cook wanted for ranch household, must be capable, clean, and good with children. Room and board provided, fair wages. He had received no responses. He had not expected any. Who would want to come out to this God-forsaken place, to this house full of ghosts and grief? Who would want to work for a man who could barely keep himself together, let alone manage 4 traumatized children? The sound of hoofbeats pulled him from his thoughts. A single rider approached from the south, moving at a steady pace, neither hurried nor slow. The horse was a chestnut mare, well cared for, its coat gleaming even under the gray November sky. Jacob's hand went instinctively to the rifle that hung above the door. In these times you did not take chances. The Sioux had defeated Custer at the Little Bighorn just 5 months ago. The entire frontier was a powder keg. Raiding parties still moved through the territory like wolves through winter woods. Every rancher slept with a gun within reach. But as the rider drew closer, Jacob saw it was a woman. She rode with the easy confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime in the saddle. Her dress was plain blue, travel-stained, and dusty from hard miles. Her coat was brown wool, practical, and worn at the elbows. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed her face, but Jacob could see the dark fall of her hair, long and black, the copper tone of her skin. His blood went cold. Samuel appeared at his side, drawn by the sound of the horse. The boy took one look at the approaching rider, and his face went white, then red, then white again. His hand moved to the hunting knife at his belt, fingers closing around the handle, with the kind of grip that turns knuckles white. "That's an Indian," Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper, but sharp with something that might have been fear, or might have been rage, or might have been both. Jacob said nothing. His hand tightened on the rifle. Behind him he heard Thomas come running from the barn, heard the boy's boots pounding across the yard, heard Lily's sharp intake of breath from the corner where she crouched with Sarah. The woman dismounted 20 yards from the house, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of long practice. She tied her horse to the fence post with quick, efficient knots. Then she walked toward them. She did not hurry. She did not hesitate. She walked like a woman who had made a decision and would see it through no matter what waited at the end. As she approached, Jacob could see her more clearly. She was young, perhaps late 20s, but her face carried the kind of weariness that added years. She had the high cheekbones and broad features of the Apache, the kind of face that white settlers had learned to fear in the dark. A small scar cut through her left eyebrow, pale against her copper skin. Her eyes were dark and steady, holding his gaze without challenge, but without submission either. When she reached the porch, she stopped. Her hands hung loose at her sides. She wore no weapons that Jacob could see, but that meant nothing. Apache women could be as deadly as the men. "Mr. Turner," she said. Her English was perfect, each word carefully enunciated, with only the slightest formality that suggested it was not her first language. "I have come about the cooking position." Behind Jacob, Thomas sucked in a sharp breath. Samuel's grip on the knife handle tightened until his knuckles cracked. From inside the house, Jacob heard Lily begin to cry, a sound like wind through broken glass. "You're Apache," Jacob said. It was not a question. Yes. The single word hung in the air between them like smoke from a gunshot. "The wagon that took my wife was attacked by Apache. I know." 2 words this time, but they carried the weight of mountains. Jacob felt Thomas move behind him, felt the boy's hand reach for something, perhaps the rifle leaning against the wall, perhaps the axe they used for splitting kindling. Samuel had gone very still, the kind of stillness that comes right before violence. "And you still came here," Jacob said slowly, each word carefully measured. The woman, this Apache woman, met his eyes without flinching. Her face was calm, but Jacob could see something moving beneath that calm, something deep and old and heavy. "I came here because of what happened to your wife, not in spite of it." Samuel made a sound like a wounded animal. Thomas cursed a word he had learned from the ranch hands, a word Ella would have washed his mouth out for using. Inside, Lily's crying grew louder. "Explain yourself," Jacob said. His finger rested on the rifle trigger, not pressing, not yet, but ready. The woman took a slow breath. When she spoke, her voice was steady, almost flat, as if she were reciting facts that had lost their power to wound her. But Jacob heard the lie in that steadiness, heard the pain underneath it, carefully controlled but never fully mastered. "My name is Nayland. In the language of my people, it means maiden. 12 years ago, I was taken by cavalry soldiers during a raid on my village near the Gila River. I was 16 years old. My father was killed trying to protect me. My mother died 3 months before of the spotted sickness that the white men brought. My 2 brothers died in the raid. I was the only one taken alive." She paused, and Jacob saw her throat work as she swallowed. "They brought me to Fort Laramie, kept me there as what they called a ward of the state. A prisoner, though they used softer words for it. I was taught English by a missionary who believed my soul could be saved if only I would abandon my people's ways. I was taught to cook and clean and sew by the officers' wives who needed servants but did not want to pay wages. I was taught that I was no longer Apache, but I could never be white. I existed in the space between belonging nowhere." Thomas had gone very still. Samuel was breathing hard through his nose, the knife still in his hand, but no longer raised. Jacob kept the rifle steady. "For 12 years I lived at that fort. Watched soldiers come and go, watched wars start and end, and start again. Watched my people hunted like animals. I learned your language so well that sometimes I dreamed in it. I learned your customs, your prayers, your way of seeing the world. But I never stopped being Apache inside. I never stopped mourning what was taken from me." "There was a woman at the fort," Nayland continued, her voice dropping slightly. "An officer's wife. Most of them treated me like furniture, like something useful, but not quite human. But this woman was different. She was kind when kindness was not required. She spoke to me as if I were a person instead of a curiosity or a threat. She taught me things the soldiers would not. How to read, how to write, how to make bread rise even in the thin mountain air, how to keep a garden alive in soil that wanted nothing to grow. She showed me that not all white people carried hate in their hearts." Jacob felt his chest begin to tighten. He knew where this was going, knew it with the certainty of a man watching storm clouds gather. Her name was Ella Turner, your wife. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Even the horses in the corral went still. The entire world narrowed down to this moment, this terrible revelation hanging in the cold November air. Samuel made a sound that was not quite a word. Thomas took a step backward, as if he had been struck. Inside the house, Lily's crying had stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the crying had been. "She spoke of you often," Nayland continued quietly, her eyes still holding Jacob's. "Of her children. Of the ranch in Wyoming, where she wanted to build a life far from the fort and the soldiers and the endless war. She showed me a photograph once. 4 children and a husband who looked at her like she was the sun itself. She told me she was the luckiest woman alive." Jacob's throat closed. He remembered that photograph, remembered the traveling photographer who had come through Fort Laramie 3 years ago, remembered Ella insisting they have a portrait made, even though it cost money they could barely spare. She had kept it in a silver locket that she wore around her neck. The locket had not been with her body. Like Ella herself, it had simply vanished. "She taught me how to make apple pie," Nayland said, and now there was something breaking in her voice, some crack in that careful control. "She taught me the songs you sing to children at bedtime. She told me about each of your children, Samuel, who wanted to be just like his father, Thomas, who could gentle any horse, Lily, who sang like a bird, and little Sarah, who was just learning to walk." "Stop," Samuel said. His voice was raw. "Stop talking about her. You don't have the right." Nayland turned to look at the boy. Her expression was gentle, but there was steel underneath it. "You are right. I do not have the right. But I will tell you this anyway, because you need to hear it. When your mother left the fort for the last time, she gave me something, a recipe book, handwritten, every recipe she knew written out in her careful script. She said, 'Nayland, someday you will have a family of your own. When that day comes, I want you to have this. I want you to remember that kindness exists in this world, even when everything else says otherwise.'" She reached into her coat and withdrew a small worn book. The leather cover was stained and cracked. She held it out not toward Jacob, but toward Samuel. "This is hers. I have carried it with me every day for 7 months. I have read it so many times I can recite most of the recipes by heart. And every time I read it, I think about the woman who was kind to me when no one else was, the woman who treated me like a human being instead of a problem to be solved." Samuel did not move, did not reach for the book. But Jacob saw the way the boy's eyes fixed on it, saw the hunger there, the desperate need to touch something his mother had touched. "When I heard that she had been killed," Nayland said, turning back to Jacob, "when I heard it was Apache warriors who attacked the wagon, I felt as though I had killed her myself, as though my blood had spilled hers. I know you cannot forgive that. I do not ask you to, but I owe her a debt I can never repay. The only thing I can do is try to help the family she loved. That is why I am here, not for wages, not for shelter, but because I must." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "And because I had nowhere else to go." Thomas had gone very pale. Jacob could see the boy trembling, could see the way his hands had curled into fists. Samuel still held the knife, but his grip had loosened. The blade pointed at the ground now, instead of at Nayland. "You think you can come here and cook our food and wash our clothes, and that makes it right?" Samuel's voice cracked on the last word. "You think that pays for what your people did to our mother?" "No," Nayland said simply. "Nothing makes it right. Nothing pays for it. But I can try. That is all anyone can do. Try to be better than the worst things that have happened to us. Try to build instead of destroy. Your mother believed that. She told me so many times." Samuel's hands were shaking now. Jacob could see tears standing in the boy's eyes. Tears the boy would die before letting fall. Tears that had been building for 7 months, held back by pure force of will, but now threatening to break through like floodwater against a failing dam. Jacob looked at Nayland, really looked at her, saw the exhaustion in the set of her shoulders, saw the determination in the line of her jaw, saw the grief that lived behind her eyes like a permanent resident, the kind of grief that never leaves, just learns to be quiet. He thought of the burned oatmeal that morning, the broken eggs scattered across the floor, the children growing wild and angry and lost, the house falling apart one broken thing at a time. His own slide into the bottle, into the dark, into the place where Ella's ghost lived and breathed and reminded him every moment of every day what he had lost. He thought of what Ella would say if she were standing here now. Ella, who had befriended an Apache girl when everyone else saw only an enemy. Ella, who had believed that people were more than the worst things they had done or the worst things done to them. Ella, who had made him promise in those last golden days before she left for Fort Laramie that he would take care of their children no matter what happened. "How long can you stay?" he asked. Nayland's eyes widened slightly, the first real emotion breaking through her careful mask. "As long as you need me," she said. Jacob lowered the rifle. Samuel made a sound like his soul was tearing in half. Thomas turned and ran, disappearing around the side of the barn, his boots kicking up dust. Inside the house, Lily had started crying again, but softer now, the sound muffled, as if she had buried her face in something. "The kitchen is through there," Jacob said, gesturing with the rifle barrel toward the open door. "You'll sleep in the small room off the back. It's not much. Used to be a pantry. I do not need much." Nayland said quietly. She walked past him up the porch steps, moving slowly and carefully, as if she were walking through a house made of glass. Samuel did not move from the doorway, forcing her to step around him. As she passed, the boy spoke, his voice low and venomous. "If anything happens to my family, if you do anything, anything at all, I will kill you myself." Nayland stopped, turned to face him, and to Jacob's surprise she did not look afraid. She looked sad. "If I do anything to harm your family," she said quietly, "I would expect nothing less. More than that, I would welcome it. I have lived with ghosts for 12 years. Sometimes death seems like a mercy." She walked into the house, leaving Samuel standing in the doorway, the knife hanging loose in his hand, his face a mask of confusion and rage and grief, all twisted together into something unrecognizable. Jacob followed her inside. The kitchen looked worse in the full light of morning than it had earlier, flour everywhere, broken eggs, burned pots, dirty dishes piled so high they threatened to topple. The whole room smelled of failure and despair. Nayland surveyed it without comment. She removed her hat and set it carefully on the table. Her hair was long and black, streaked with early gray, despite her youth pulled back in a simple braid. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing forearms marked with scars, some old and faded, some newer. The kind of scars that came from hard work and harder living. "I will clean this first," she said. "Then I will make a proper meal. You should eat. Your children should eat. Everything else can wait." Jacob wanted to say something, wanted to explain that this was temporary, that he did not trust her, that one wrong move and she would be gone. But the words would not come. He was too tired, too broken, too desperate. Instead, he just nodded and walked back out onto the porch. Samuel still stood in the doorway, but he had put the knife away. The boy's face was wet with tears, now tears he was no longer trying to hide. "Papa," he whispered, How could you let her in?" Jacob put his hand on his son's shoulder. Samuel flinched, but did not pull away. "Because we're drowning, Sam. We're all drowning. And she's offering us a rope. Maybe it's a bad rope. Maybe it'll break. But I'd rather grab it and risk drowning anyway than just give up and sink." "That's not an answer," Samuel said. "I know," Jacob replied, "but it's all I've got." The first week passed like a slow torture. Nayland worked from before sunrise until after dark, moving through the house like a ghost, silent and efficient. She cleaned the kitchen until it gleamed. She scrubbed floors. She washed windows. She organized the pantry and discovered things they had forgotten they owned. She worked like a woman possessed, like someone trying to earn her right to exist through pure industry. And she cooked. The first meal she made was beef stew with dumplings, thick and rich and perfect. The smell filled the house, made Jacob's mouth water, reminded him of winter evenings when Ella was alive and the world made sense. The children refused to eat it. Samuel pushed his bowl away without tasting it. "I'm not hungry," he said, though his stomach had been growling for an hour. Thomas stared at his bowl for a long moment, then deliberately tipped it over. The stew spilled across the table, brown gravy, soaking into the wood. "Sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. My hand slipped. Lily looked at the food with something like longing, but when Nayland placed a bowl in front of her, the little girl shook her head and whispered, "No, thank you," so quietly Jacob barely heard it. Only Sarah, too young to understand politics or hate or loyalty, ate happily, making appreciative noises and demanding more. Nayland cleaned up the spilled stew without comment. She wrapped the remaining food and put it away. Then she made simple oatmeal, which the children ate with sullen resentment, as if even that was a betrayal. The second day was worse. Thomas found a dead mouse and put it in Naline's bed. She discovered it when she pulled back the blanket that night, saw the small corpse lying on her pillow, flies already gathering. She removed it without flinching, wrapped it in cloth, and buried it behind the barn. The third day Samuel refused to speak to Jacob, refused to acknowledge his father's presence, moved through the house like a vengeful spirit, his silence more damaging than any words could have been. The fourth day Lily had nightmares so bad she woke up screaming. Jacob ran to her room and found her sitting up in bed, eyes wide but unseeing, screaming about blood and fire and shadows that walked like men. He held her until the screaming turned to crying, until the crying turned to hiccuping sobs, until finally she fell back into exhausted sleep. The fifth day Thomas got into a fight at school so vicious that the teacher misses. Henderson rode out to the ranch personally to inform Jacob that if it happened again, Thomas would be expelled. The boy had given Billy Sanders a black eye and a broken nose. When Jacob asked why, Thomas just shrugged and said he had it coming. The sixth day, Samuel disappeared for 6 hours. Jacob found him finally on the hill behind the house, sitting by Ella's grave, his hunting knife stuck point first into the ground beside him. "What are you doing up here?" Jacob asked. Samuel did not look at him, talking to Mama, telling her, "I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" "For letting you replace her." The words hit Jacob like a physical blow. He sat down beside his son, his joints creaking, his whole body feeling ancient. "I'm not replacing her, Sam. Nobody could replace her." "Then why is that woman here?" Samuel's voice was flat, empty. "Why is an Apache sleeping in Mama's house, cooking in Mama's kitchen, touching Mama's things?" "Because I don't know what else to do," Jacob said honestly. "Because I'm failing you kids. Because I can't be your father and your mother both. Because I'm so tired I can barely stand up most days. Because I need help and she's the only one who offered." "She's Apache," Samuel said. And now there was heat in his voice, real emotion breaking through. "Her people killed Mama. How can you look at her and not see that I do see it?" Jacob said quietly. "Every time I look at her, I see it. But I also see something else. I see a woman who loved your mother, who grieves for her maybe as much as we do. And I see someone trying to do something good in a world that's done nothing but bad to her. That doesn't make it right." "No," Jacob agreed, "it doesn't. But it makes it possible. And right now possible is all I can manage." Samuel pulled the knife from the ground and stood up. He looked down at his father with eyes that were far too old for 14. "One day, Papa, you're going to have to choose, her or us. And when that day comes, I hope you make the right choice." He walked away, leaving Jacob sitting alone beside the grave of his wife, wondering if his son was right, wondering if he had already made the wrong choice, wondering if there even was a right choice anymore, or if the world had simply stopped offering them. On the seventh night, everything changed. It was past midnight when Jacob woke to the sound of screaming. He was out of bed and running. Before he was fully conscious, his heart pounding, his mind filling with terrible images. Apache raiders, fire, his children being taken the way Ella had been taken. But when he reached Lily's room, he found only his daughter sitting up in bed, her face pale and slick with sweat, her eyes wide and terrified, but seeing nothing. She was caught in the grip of a nightmare so powerful it had pulled her partially awake, but not enough to escape it. "Lily, sweetheart, wake up. You're dreaming." But she could not hear him. She was screaming words he could barely make out. "Mama, don't go. Mama, come back. The fire is coming." Samuel appeared in the doorway, still half asleep. Thomas was right behind him, rubbing his eyes. Even Sarah had woken crying in confusion from her small bed in the corner. Jacob tried to hold Lily, but she fought him, her small fists beating against his chest, her screams growing louder, more desperate. He did not know what to do. Ella had always been better at this, had always known how to calm the children when they were frightened or hurt or lost. And then Nayland was there. She moved into the room without asking permission, without hesitation. She knelt beside the bed and began to sing. The melody was strange and haunting, nothing like the hymns Ella used to sing, or the folk songs Jacob remembered from his own childhood. It was something older, something that seemed to rise from the earth itself, from a place before words, before language, when humans communicated in sounds that predated meaning. Lily's screaming faltered. Her fists unclenched. Her breathing, which had been coming in sharp, panicked gasps, began to slow. Nayland kept singing, her voice low and steady, and gradually she reached out and took Lily's hand. The little girl did not pull away. Slowly, as if moving through water, Lily turned toward the sound. Nayland sang about the desert at night, about stars that watched over sleeping children, about the earth that held them safe. She sang in Apache, but somehow the meaning came through anyway, carried on the melody itself. And then in English, she began to sing a different song, a lullaby that Jacob recognized, one that Ella used to sing. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's going to buy you a mockingbird." Lily's eyes focused. She saw Nayland kneeling beside her bed, saw this Apache woman singing her mother's song, and something broke in the little girl's face. Mama used to sing that she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. Mama sang it every night. "I know," Nayland said gently. "She taught it to me, along with many other songs. Your mama had a beautiful voice." "Did you know that?" Lily shook her head. "She did," Nayland continued, "like a bird in the morning. She told me that you inherited her voice, that you used to sing together while you worked in the garden." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face now, but quieter tears, healing tears. "She also told me," Nayland said, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from Lily's face, "that you were brave, that when you were scared you would sing to yourself to feel better. She said music lived in your heart, and that nothing could take that away from you." Lily looked at Nayland with those wide, wounded eyes. "I can't sing anymore," she whispered. "I tried. But the songs won't come out. They will," Nayland said softly, "when you are ready. When your heart has healed enough. The songs are still there. They are just sleeping like you were sleeping. And when they wake up, they will be even more beautiful than before." "How do you know?" "Because I lost my songs once, too," Nayland said. "For a very long time. And then one day I found them again. Not the same songs, but new ones, better ones. Songs that helped me remember the people I loved without feeling like I was drowning in sadness." Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then so softly Jacob almost missed it, she said, "Will you teach me?" Nayland smiled. It was the first smile Jacob had seen on her face since she arrived. It transformed her, made her look younger, less haunted. "Yes," she said, "I will teach you." Lily lay back down, still holding Nayland's hand. Within minutes she was asleep, her breathing deep and even, the nightmare finally released. Nayland stood slowly. She turned and found the entire family watching from the doorway. Samuel with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Thomas looking confused and angry, and something else, something that might have been hope. Sarah in Jacob's arms, sucking her thumb, her eyes heavy with sleep. "I am sorry," Nayland said quietly. "I should have asked permission before coming in." "Don't apologize," Jacob said. His voice was rough with emotion. "You helped her when I couldn't, when none of us could." Samuel turned and walked away without a word. But he did not slam any doors. He just walked away, and somehow that felt different, felt like the beginning of something instead of the end. Thomas lingered in the doorway for a moment longer. "That song you sang," he said, "the first one, in your language. What did it mean?" Nalin met the boy's eyes. "It is a song mothers sing to children who are frightened. It says that the earth remembers everyone who walks upon it, that the stars keep watch over the sleeping, that death is not the end, only a changing, that those we love never truly leave us." Thomas nodded slowly. Then he too walked away back to his own room. Jacob stood alone with Nalin in the hallway. The lamp he had brought cast long shadows on the walls. "Thank you," he said. "She is a good child," Nalin replied. "They all are. They are just hurting. We're all hurting." "Yes," Nalin said quietly, "we are." She turned to go, but Jacob found himself speaking again, words tumbling out before he could stop them. "The book you brought, the recipe book. Did Ella really give it to you?" Nalin stopped. She reached into her dress pocket and withdrew the small worn leather volume. She held it out to him. "Yes." 2 days before she left Fort Laramie for the last time, she said she had a feeling that she wanted me to have something of hers just in case. I thought she was being foolish. I told her nothing would happen, that the road to Wyoming was safe, that the Apache were far to the south. Her voice broke on the last word. I was wrong. Jacob took the book, opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed, covered in Ella's careful handwriting. He recognized recipes he had eaten 100 times. Apple pie with cinnamon, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, molasses cookies. Each recipe written out in loving detail with little notes in the margins. Samuel loves extra cinnamon. Thomas prefers his meat well done. Lily likes hers sweet. Jacob's vision blurred. He closed the book and handed it back to Nalin. "Keep it," he said. "She gave it to you. She wanted you to have it. But your children, my children, need you to use it," Jacob said. "They need to eat the food their mother taught you to make. They need to remember her through more than just grief and nightmares." Maybe he added quietly, "We all do." Nalin took the book back, cradling it against her chest like something precious. "I will not let you down, Mr. Turner. I will take care of them as if they were my own." "I believe you," Jacob said, and realized with some surprise that it was true. After Nalin returned to her small room, Jacob stood in the dark hallway for a long time, holding Sarah, who had fallen back asleep, against his shoulder. He thought about Ella, about the woman she had been, about her kindness, her faith, her belief that people were capable of more than the worst of themselves. He thought about Nalin, about everything she had survived, about the courage it must have taken to come here to this house full of people who had every reason to hate her. And he thought about his children, about Samuel's rage, about Thomas's confusion, about Lily's fear, about Sarah's innocence. Something had changed tonight. Some small crack had appeared in the wall they had all built around themselves. It was not much. It was not forgiveness. It was not trust. But it was something. It was the first breath after drowning. It was the first light before dawn. It was possible. And for the first time in 7 months, Jacob Turner allowed himself to believe that possible might eventually become enough. Winter came to Wyoming territory like a slow closing fist. December brought snow that fell in sheets, burying the prairie under 3 feet of white silence. The wind howled down from the mountains with teeth made of ice, turning the ranch into an island surrounded by frozen wilderness. The cattle huddled in the barn. The horses stamped and snorted, their breath rising in clouds. And inside the Turner house, something fragile and new struggled to take root in soil that had been salted with grief. 3 weeks had passed since the night Nalin sang to Lily. 3 weeks since that first small crack had appeared in the wall of hatred and fear. 3 weeks of careful progress, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, building something that resembled a truce if you squinted and did not look too closely. Nayland rose before dawn every morning, moving through the cold house with quiet efficiency. She built fires in the stove and the hearth. She made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She prepared breakfast while the sky outside was still black, while stars still wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Jacob would come downstairs to find hot food waiting in the kitchen, warm the smell of bread baking, filling the air like a promise. He never asked her to do this. She simply did it as if feeding his family were a sacred duty, a debt she was determined to repay, no matter the cost. The children were slower to accept her presence. Samuel remained cold and distant, speaking to Nayland only when absolutely necessary, his words clipped and formal. He did not throw food away anymore, but he ate mechanically without pleasure, as if each bite were an act of betrayal he forced himself to commit for the sake of survival. He watched Nayland constantly, his eyes tracking her movements through the house, looking for something, evidence of deceit, proof of danger, some justification for the hatred he clung to, like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Thomas was unpredictable. Some days he ignored Nayland, completely acting as if she did not exist. Other days he tested her, leaving messes for her to clean, breaking things to see if she would lose her temper, pushing boundaries the way children do when they need to know where the walls are. Nayland never rose to the bait. She cleaned up his messes without complaint. She repaired what he broke. She simply continued steady as winter rain. Lily had warmed to Nayland more than the others, but the little girl's affection came wrapped in guilt. Jacob saw it in the way she would start to smile at something Nayland said, then catch herself, then glance toward Ella's portrait on the mantel as if asking forgiveness. Saw it in the way she would help Nayland in the kitchen, learning to knead dough and roll out pie crust, but always in whispers, always careful not to let her brothers see her enjoyment. Only Sarah, blessed with the amnesia of toddlerhood, accepted Nayland without reservation. She followed the Apache woman around the house, a small shadow with bright eyes and reaching hands. She climbed into Nayland's lap during meals. She demanded songs in that language she could not understand, but somehow recognized. She called Nayland by a name of her own invention, a mangled approximation of Nayland's Apache name that sounded like Nana, and everyone pretended not to notice that it was one letter away from Mama. On the morning of December 15th, Jacob came downstairs to find Lily standing on a wooden stool at the kitchen counter, carefully stirring something in a large bowl, while Nayland stood beside her, hands clasped behind her back, offering guidance in that soft, patient voice she used with the children. "That is good," Nayland was saying. "Slow circles. Do not rush. Bread is like trust. It cannot be hurried. You must give it time to become what it is meant to be." Lily nodded seriously, her tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated. Her arms were dusted with flour up to the elbows. A smudge of it decorated her nose like war paint. "And remember what I told you about patience?" Lily's face broke into a small smile. "Cooking takes time, just like learning to ride a horse." "Exactly. Your mama understood this. She told me once that the best things in life require patience, love, family, good bread." Jacob leaned against the doorway watching. Something in his chest loosened. For the first time in months, his daughter looked like a child again instead of a ghost. For the first time since Ella died, there was color in her cheeks, light in her eyes. "Morning," he said. Both of them turned. Lily's smile widened. "Papa, look. I am making bread. Real bread, not the flat kind that comes from the store." "I see that," Jacob said. "Looks like you are doing a fine job." "Nayland says Mama used to let her help in the kitchen too," Lily added, and just like that the light dimmed slightly. The guilt crept back in. She looked down at the bowl, her stirring slowing. Nayland placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Sweetheart, you never have to choose between remembering your mama and learning new things. Love does not get smaller when you make room for more. It grows. Like bread dough rising, there is always room for more." Lily looked up at her eyes shining with unshed tears. Really, really. Jacob felt his throat tighten. Those were words he had not known how to say, words his daughter had needed to hear, words that maybe all of them needed to hear. Samuel appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed for the day, his face already set in the hard lines that had become his default expression. He looked at the scene in the kitchen, at Lily and Naline working together, and something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or anger, or both twisted together into something unnameable. Thomas thundered down the stairs behind him, moving with the careless energy of an 11-year-old boy who has not yet learned to be quiet. He stopped when he saw them, his eyes going to the bread dough, then to his sister's flour-dusted face, then to Nayland. "What are you making?" Bread Lily said. "Want to help?" Thomas hesitated. Jacob could see the war playing out on his son's face, the desire to be included fighting against the need to maintain his loyalty to the dead. Nayland made the choice for him. "I need someone to fetch more wood for the stove," she said. "The bread will need steady heat for rising. Your father tells me you are the best at choosing the right pieces. Not too green, not too dry." Thomas straightened slightly. Pa said that. Jacob caught on quickly. "Yes, you have a good eye for wood." The boy nodded, pleased to be recognized, to have a role that was his alone. He headed for the door, pulling on his coat. "I will get the best pieces," he said over his shoulder. "You will see." After he left, Samuel descended the rest of the stairs slowly. He poured himself coffee from the pot on the stove, still not looking at anyone. "Breakfast will be ready in a moment," Naline said quietly. "I am not hungry. You should eat anyway." Samuel's jaw tightened. He set down his cup with more force than necessary. "Do not tell me what I should do. You are the cook, not my mother." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lily flinched. Jacob opened his mouth to intervene, but Nayland spoke first, her voice calm and measured. "You are right. I am not your mother. I could never be your mother. Ella Turner was a remarkable woman, and I was fortunate to know her. All I am trying to do is keep you fed and healthy, because that is what she would want. That is what any mother would want." Samuel finally looked at her. His eyes were hard, but underneath the hardness, Jacob could see the pain. "My mother wanted a lot of things," the boy said quietly. "Most of all, she wanted to live, and your people took that from her." Nayland did not flinch. She met Samuel's gaze steadily. "Yes, they did. And I carry that weight every day, but I cannot change what happened. I can only try to honor her memory by caring for the family she loved." "If that is not enough for you, I understand. But it is all I have to offer." Samuel stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee and walked out of the kitchen without another word. Jacob released a breath he had not realized he was holding. "I am sorry," he said. Nayland shook her head. "Do not apologize for him. He has every right to his anger. Time will soften it, or it will not. Either way, I will be here." That afternoon, while Naline was teaching Lily how to shape the risen dough into loaves, Thomas burst through the door with news that sent a jolt of excitement through the house. "Pa, come quick. The new foal is here." The mare they had been watching for weeks had finally given birth. Jacob hurried to the barn, with all 4 children trailing behind him, even Samuel, his curiosity overcoming his determination to remain aloof. Nayland followed at a distance, not invited, but not explicitly excluded either. The foal was perfect. A colt long-legged and wobbly, his coat a rich chestnut that caught the light streaming through the barn slats. He stood pressed against his mother's side, already trying to nurse his small tail flicking with determination. The children crowded around the stall, voices rising in excitement. "He is beautiful," Lily breathed. "Look at his legs," Thomas said. "He is going to be tall, strong too." Samuel added, his guard dropping for just a moment. "See how he stands already." "Most foals take longer," Sarah pointed with one chubby finger. "Baby horse." Jacob felt something unknot in his chest. This was normal. This was what childhood should look like: wonder and excitement and life continuing despite death. Nylon stood back, giving them space, but her eyes were soft as she watched the children. Thomas turned suddenly. What should we name him? The question was directed at everyone and no one. Lily looked at her brothers. Samuel looked at his father. And then, surprisingly, Thomas looked at Nylon. Do you have any ideas? Nylon hesitated clearly, surprised to be included. She looked at the foal, considering. In my language we have a word, bima. It means his horse, but it also means one who carries you forward, into the future. Perhaps something that means the same in English would be fitting. What about Scout? Jacob suggested. He looks like he is ready to explore every corner of this ranch. The children tested the name, saying it aloud, seeing how it fit. Scout, Lily repeated. I like it. Scout, Thomas agreed. It is a good name. Even Samuel nodded. Scout works? Sarah clapped her hands. Scout, Scout, Scout. And just like that it was decided. The foal had a name. And, for the first time since Ella died, the family had made a decision together without anger or grief dragging them down. That evening, after the children were in bed, Jacob found Nylon on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the snow-covered prairie. The moon was nearly full, turning the landscape into something alien and beautiful, a world of silver and shadow. You do not have to stand out here in the cold, he said. I like the cold, she replied. It reminds me that I am alive, that I have survived another day. Jacob joined her, leaning against the porch railing. His breath misted in the freezing air. You were good with them today, with the children. They are good children. They just need to know they are safe, that the world has not ended, even though it feels like it has. Is that what you needed? After your village was destroyed, Nylon was quiet for a long moment. After my village was destroyed, after my family died, I did not believe I would ever feel safe again. The soldiers who took me were not cruel, not exactly, but they were not kind either. I was a thing to them, a problem, a responsibility they had not asked for. At the fort, I learned to make myself useful because useful things are not discarded, but I never felt safe. Not until your wife. What did she do? Nylon turned to look at him, and in the moonlight her face was all plains and shadows. She saw me, not as an Apache or a prisoner or a servant, just as a person. She asked me my name, not the English name the missionaries gave me, but my real name. And when I told her, she used it, every time. Nylon, she would say, would you like some tea? Nylon, tell me about your mother. Nylon, you are not alone. Such simple words. But they gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. What was that? My humanity. Nylon said simply. They stood in silence, watching the moon track across the sky. An owl called from somewhere in the distance, its voice lonely and wild. Why did you really come here? Jacob asked. And do not tell me it was just because you owed Ella. There is more to it than that. Nylon pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. At the fort I had a purpose. I was useful, but I was also trapped. When Ella died, I realized that the only person who saw me as human was gone. Without her, I was just an Apache woman living among people who barely tolerated me. Some of the soldiers had started looking at me differently, saying things, suggesting things. I knew it was only a matter of time before tolerance turned to something worse. Jacob felt a spike of anger. Did anyone hurt you? Not yet. But they would have, so I left. I took Ella's recipe book and what little money I had saved, and I walked away from the only home I had known for 12 years. I did not have a plan. I did not know where to go. And then I remembered Ella talking about her family, about the ranch in Wyoming, about the children who would need someone after she was gone. She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I came here because I had nowhere else. But I stayed because I saw in your children's eyes the same thing I saw in my own reflection for 12 years. People who had lost everything and did not know how to find their way back. I know that path. I have walked it. If I can help them walk it too, then maybe my survival means something. Maybe there is a reason I am still alive when so many I loved are dead." Jacob felt something shift in his chest. He had been thinking of Nalin as someone who had come to help him to solve his problems, to fill the gap Ella left. But she was not here for him. She was here for herself, trying to find meaning in a life that had stolen meaning from her again and again. "You are a good woman, Nalin." She shook her head. "I am a woman who has done what she needed to survive. That is not the same thing." Before Jacob could respond, the sound of boots on the porch made them both turn. Samuel stood in the doorway, wrapped in a coat, his face unreadable in the shadows. "Samuel," Jacob said. "What are you doing up? Could not sleep?" the boy said. His eyes moved between his father and Nalin, calculating something. "Came out for air." "It is cold," Nalin said. "You should go back inside." "I will go where I want," Samuel replied, but there was less heat in his voice than usual. "This is my home." "No one said it was." "Not," Jacob said carefully. Samuel walked to the far end of the porch, putting distance between himself and them. He stared out at the snow, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "The foal is good," he said after a moment. "Strong. He will make a fine horse." "Yes," Jacob agreed. "Mama would have liked him. She always loved the births. Said they reminded her that life keeps going even when you think it has stopped." Nalin spoke softly. "She told me once that she found hope in beginnings, that every new life was a promise that the world had not given up yet." Samuel's shoulders tensed. "You talk about her like you knew her, but you only knew her at the fort. You did not know her here. You did not know her as our mother." "You are right," Nalin said. "I knew only one part of her, the part that was kind to a girl who had no one. But from what she told me, from the way she spoke of you and your brothers and sister, I think the part I knew was not so different from the part you knew. She loved fiercely. She believed in second chances. She saw good in people, even when they did not see it in themselves." Samuel turned to face her, and in the moonlight Jacob could see tears on his son's face. "Then why did she leave us? If she loved us so much, why did she go to Fort Laramie? Why did she put herself in danger?" Jacob felt the words like a knife between his ribs. This was the question Samuel had been carrying for 7 months, the question that haunted all of them. "She went because we needed supplies," Jacob said, "because someone had to go, and she was the one who knew the quartermaster. She went because she thought it was safe, because we all thought it was safe. But it was not," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "And now she is gone, and there is an Apache woman sleeping in our house. And I do not know how to feel about any of it. I do not know if I am supposed to hate you or thank you or just pretend you do not exist." Nalin took a step toward him, moving slowly, carefully, as one might approach a wounded animal. "You do not have to know," she said gently. "You do not have to have it all figured out. You are 14 years old. You are allowed to be confused and angry and sad all at the same time. All I ask is that you do not let your anger poison you. Do not let it turn you into someone your mother would not recognize. You do not get to tell me what my mother would want," Samuel said, but there was no venom in it, just exhaustion, just pain. "You are right," Nalin said. "I do not. But I can tell you what I would want if I were your mother. I would want you to live, really live, not just survive, not just exist in the shadow of what you lost. I would want you to find joy again, even if it feels like betrayal at first. I would want you to laugh and love and build something beautiful with the life you have been given." Samuel was crying openly, now his face twisted with grief and confusion, and something that might have been the beginning of release. "I miss her so much," he whispered. "Every day, every moment. And I am so angry at the Apache who killed her, at Pa for letting her go, at God for taking her, at myself for not being there. I am angry all the time, and I do not know how to stop." Jacob moved toward his son, but Nalin reached Samuel first. She did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She pulled the boy into an embrace, holding him as he sobbed against her shoulder, his whole body shaking with the force of grief finally unleashed. "Be angry," she whispered. "You have earned that right, but do not let it consume you. Do not let it turn you into a weapon aimed at the world. Your mother would not want that. She would want you to take that anger and forge it into something else, something that builds instead of destroys." Samuel cried for a long time. Jacob stood watching his own eyes, burning his throat tight. When the boy finally pulled away, he looked smaller somehow, as if the grief he had been holding him up, and without it, he was just a child again. "I am sorry," Samuel said, though it was unclear who he was apologizing to. "You have nothing to be sorry for," Nalin said. Samuel wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked at Nalin, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. "I do not hate you," he said. "I thought I did. I wanted to. But I do not. I just do not know what to do with all of this." "Neither do I," Nalin said honestly. "But maybe we can figure it out together." Samuel nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked back into the house, his steps heavy, but somehow lighter than they had been. Jacob exhaled slowly. "Thank you," he said. "I did nothing," Nalin replied. "He did the hard work himself. You gave him permission to feel it, to let it out. I have been trying for months and could not reach him. Sometimes it is easier to break in front of a stranger than in front of the people you love. There is less to lose, less fear of disappointing them." "You are not a stranger anymore," Jacob said. Nalin looked at him, and for just a moment something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two people who had survived when they should not have, trying to make sense of what came after. "No," she said softly. "I suppose I am not." The next morning brought with it a howling blizzard that trapped them all inside for 3 days. Snow piled against the windows. Wind screamed around the corners of the house. The world beyond the walls disappeared into white chaos, but inside something had changed. Samuel spoke to Nalin at breakfast. Just a few words. "Pass the salt. Thank you for the coffee," small things. But to Jacob they sounded like an armistice being signed. Thomas asked Nalin to tell him more Apache words. She taught him the names for snow, wind, horse, brother. He repeated them carefully, his pronunciation terrible, but his effort genuine. Lily sang while she worked beside Nalin in the kitchen, her voice still soft but growing stronger. The songs Ella used to sing mixed with new songs Nalin taught her, creating something that was neither Apache nor American, but something in between, something new. And Sarah, blessed Sarah, simply loved everyone with the uncomplicated totality that only small children possess. On the third night of the blizzard, when the wind finally died down and the snow stopped falling, they all gathered by the fireplace. Jacob had told the children to bring their blankets and pillows. They made a nest of warmth in the center of the room, the fire crackling, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Nalin, Lily said, settling into her blanket, "Will you tell us a story?" "What kind of story?" "One from your people, about the desert and the stars." Nalin glanced at Jacob, seeking permission. He nodded. She began to speak, her voice taking on a rhythm that was almost musical. She told them about Coyote, the trickster who stole fire from the gods to give to humans. She told them about Spider-Woman, who taught the people to weave. She told them about the stars, how each one was a soul that had passed from the world but still watched over those below. The children listened rapt. Even Samuel, who still wore his wariness like armor, leaned forward, drawn in by the cadence of her words. When she finished, Thomas asked, "Do you miss it, the desert, every day?" Nalin said honestly, "But missing something does not mean you cannot love where you are now. People are not meant to have only one home, only one family, only one story. We are meant to grow, to change, to carry with us the places we have been while making room for the places we are going." Samuel spoke up, his voice quiet. "Did you have a family?" "Before the soldiers came, yes, I had a mother and a father, 2 brothers, both older. My father was a warrior and a healer. My mother was the best cook in our village. My brothers were wild and brave and made me laugh every day. What happened to them? Nalin was quiet for a long moment. The fire popped and hissed. My mother died of smallpox the winter before the raid. My father and brothers died fighting when the soldiers came. I was hidden by my mother's sister, but they found me anyway. I was the only one taken alive. For a long time I wished they had killed me too. It would have been easier than surviving alone. But you did survive, Lily said. Yes, I survived. And slowly, very slowly, I learned that surviving was not the same as living. Your mother taught me that. She showed me that it was possible to honor the dead by living well, by finding joy again, by refusing to let grief turn you to stone. Jacob felt something loosen in his chest. He had been holding on to his grief so tightly, clutching it like a treasure, afraid that letting go would mean forgetting. But listening to Nalin, hearing her speak of survival and life and honor, he understood that he had been doing it wrong. Ella would not want him to become a ghost. She would not want their children to live in shadow. She would want them to remember her with love, not pain, to carry her forward not as a weight, but as a light. That night, after the children were asleep, Jacob found himself standing in the kitchen where Nalin was banking the fire in the stove. "You are good with them," he said, "better than I have been. You are their father. You do not have to be perfect. You just have to be present. I have not been. Not really. I have been drunk or broken or both. But you are here now," Nalin said. "That is what matters, today, this moment, not yesterday, not tomorrow." Jacob nodded. Then, before he could stop himself, he asked the question that had been building in him for days. What happens when spring comes, when the snow melts and the roads open up again? "Will you leave?" Nalin turned to face him fully. In the dim light, her eyes were dark and unreadable. "Do you want me to leave?" Jacob realized with some surprise that he did not. Not anymore. She had become part of the rhythm of this house, part of what made it work. More than that, she had become something he had not expected. A friend, an ally, someone who understood grief from the inside. "No," he said, "I do not want you to leave, unless you want to go." "I have nowhere to go," Nalin said. "This is the closest thing I have had to a home in 12 years. "Then stay," Jacob said, "for as long as you want." Nalin smiled, small and sad and genuine. "Then I will stay." But neither of them knew that tomorrow would bring a visitor who would test everything they had built. A visitor who would force them all to make choices they were not ready to make. A visitor who would remind them that the past is never as far away as we wish it to be. The promise of peace lasted exactly one night. Jacob woke the next morning with a strange feeling in his gut, the kind of unease that comes not from dreams, but from some animal instinct that whispers danger before the mind can name it. He rose before dawn, as had become his habit, and found Nalin already in the kitchen, but she was not cooking. She stood at the window, her hand pressed flat against the cold glass, staring out at something he could not yet see. "What is it?" he asked. She did not turn. A rider, coming from the south. That was when he saw it. A dark shape moving across the frozen prairie, still distant but unmistakable. The rider appeared on the horizon at dawn, a dark figure against the pink and gold sky, moving toward the ranch with the steady purpose of someone on a mission. Jacob saw him from the kitchen window, where he stood drinking his first coffee of the morning, the cup warming his hands, steam rising into the cold air. Something in the way the rider sat his horse, something in the deliberate pace, made Jacob's stomach tighten with unease. He set down his cup and reached for the rifle. Nalin appeared in the doorway, already dressed, her hair braided, flour dusting her hands from the biscuits she had been preparing. She saw Jacob's face, saw the rifle, and moved to the window. When she saw the rider, all color drained from her face. "What is it?" Jacob asked. "Do you know him?" Nalin's hand went to her throat, fingers finding the small turquoise pendant she wore, the only piece of her Apache life she had kept. Her lips moved, forming a word in her own language, a word that sounded like prayer or curse or both. "His name is Goyakla. He is a warrior of my people, a scout for the war chiefs. If he is here, it is not by accident." Is he dangerous? All Apache warriors are dangerous, Nalin said quietly. But Goyakla is also honorable. He will not attack without cause. Let me speak to him. Absolutely not, Jacob said. You will stay inside with the children. This is Apache business. It concerns me, not you. Everything that happens on this ranch concerns me, and I will not let you walk out there alone to face an armed warrior. Nalin turned to face him, and for the first time since she had arrived there was steel in her voice, command in her bearing. For a moment Jacob glimpsed the girl she had been. Before the soldiers came, the daughter of a chief raised to lead. If you go out there with a rifle, he will see it as a threat. If I go out there unarmed, he will see it as respect. Which do you think is more likely to end without bloodshed? Jacob hesitated. She was right, and he knew it. But every instinct screamed at him not to let her go. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Samuel appeared, followed by Thomas, both boys drawn by the tension in the air. What is happening? Samuel asked, his hand already moving toward the knife at his belt. We have a visitor, Jacob said, an Apache. Samuel's face went hard. Thomas moved to the window, craning to see. The rider was closer now, perhaps 100 yards away. He was an older man, lean and weathered, his face deeply lined, his hair streaked with gray. He wore a mixture of traditional Apache clothing and pieces taken from the white world. A cavalry jacket over deerskin leggings, a wide-brimmed hat above a face marked with the scars of old battles. He carried a rifle across his saddle, but his hands were loose on the reins, not reaching for the weapon. Samuel, take your brother and sisters upstairs, Jacob said. Now. But Pa? Now, Samuel? And keep them there until I come get you. The boy hesitated, then nodded. He understood the tone. This was not a discussion. He herded Thomas back up the stairs. Jacob heard doors closing, heard the murmur of voices as Samuel explained to Lily what was happening. Nalin moved toward the door. Jacob caught her arm. If anything goes wrong. It will not, she said. But if it does protect your children, that is all that matters. She walked out onto the porch, her steps slow, and measured her hands visible and empty. Jacob followed, staying behind her, the rifle held low but ready. The Apache warrior reined in his horse 20 feet from the porch. Up close, Jacob could see that he was older than he had first appeared, perhaps 60, but his eyes were sharp and alert, missing nothing. Those eyes moved from Nalin to Jacob to the rifle, calculating, assessing. Then Goyakla spoke, his voice carrying clearly in the cold morning air. He spoke in Apache, the words flowing like water over stone, harsh and beautiful at once. Nalin answered in the same language, her voice steady but respectful. They spoke for several minutes, a conversation Jacob could not understand but could read in their body language. Goyakla's posture was formal, almost ceremonial. Nalin's was deferential but not submissive. Finally, Goyakla switched to English, his accent thick, but his words clear. I have come for Nalin, daughter of Cochilo Negro, daughter of the Chiricahua. Her people have need of her. Nalin is under my protection, Jacob said, his voice level. She works for me. She stays here by her own choice. Goyakla's eyes moved to Jacob, studying him with an intensity that was almost physical. You are the man whose woman was killed by our warriors, yet you shelter one of us in your home. This is strange. My wife was killed in a war I did not start and cannot stop, Jacob said carefully. Miss Hayes had nothing to do with that. She has helped my family. She has earned her place here. Goyakla looked back at Nalin and spoke again in Apache. Nalin responded, her voice rising, slightly emotional now. The old warrior listened, his face impassive, then shook his head slowly. He turned back to Jacob. The daughter of Cochilo Negro is needed by her people. We are few now, hunted, dying. The war chiefs are trying to make peace with the white soldiers, but we have no one who speaks both tongues with truth. No one the soldiers will trust. No one our people will trust. She is the bridge we need. Nalin stepped forward. I cannot go back, Goyakla. I have been gone too long. I am not the girl you remember. I do not belong in the camps anymore. "You are still Chiricahua," the old warrior said. "That does not change. Blood is blood." "Blood is just blood," Nalin replied. "It is what we do with our lives that defines us. I am trying to do something good here, to help children who have lost their mother, to honor a debt I owe to a woman who showed me kindness when I had forgotten what kindness was. And what of the debt you owe to your people, to your father's memory, to all who died while you lived safe among the enemy?" The words hit like arrows. Nayland flinched, her hands clenching into fists. "I have lived with that guilt every day for 12 years, she said, her voice shaking now. "Do not speak to me of debts I owe. I know them better than anyone. Then come back. Pay those debts. Help us survive what is coming." "And what is coming, the end," Goyakla said simply. "One way or another. The white soldiers are too many. The wars have cost us too much. We need peace or we need to die fighting. Either way, we need someone who can speak for us, someone the whites will listen to. You are that person, Nayland. You are the last daughter of a chief. You are the only one left who can stand between two worlds." Jacob saw the conflict on Nayland's face, saw the way her shoulders sagged, as if under a physical weight. She had built something here fragile, but real. She had begun to heal, and now her past was calling her back, demanding payment for the crime of surviving. "She has 3 days to decide," Goyakla said. "I will return then. If she does not come with me, she will be declared dead to our people. There will be no going back, no second chance. She will be Apache in blood only, dead in spirit." He turned his horse and rode away, not hurrying, disappearing into the winter landscape like a ghost. Jacob and Nayland stood in silence, watching him go. Finally Jacob spoke. "You do not have to go." Nayland turned to face him, and he saw tears on her cheeks, the first tears he had seen her shed. "Part of me wants to. Part of me has wanted to go back since the day the soldiers took me. But another part of me knows he is right. I am not that girl anymore. I have lived too long among your people. I think in English now. I dream in English. When I pray, the words that come are the ones the missionaries taught me, not the ones my mother sang. I am caught between two worlds, and I do not fully belong in either." "Then stay here," Jacob said. "Make this your world. You belong here. The children need you. I need you." The words surprised him even as he spoke them. But they were true. Somewhere in the past weeks, Nalin had become essential, not just as a cook or a housekeeper, but as a presence that held them all together, a calm center in the storm of their grief. Nalin wiped her eyes. "I need time to think," she said. 3 days. That is what he gave me. 3 days to decide who I am and where I belong." She walked back into the house, leaving Jacob standing alone on the porch, the rifle heavy in his hands, his mind churning with questions he did not know how to answer. The next 2 days were strange and tense, as if the entire household was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Nayland went about her work with mechanical efficiency, but the light had gone out of her eyes. She was physically present, but spiritually absent, wrestling with demons Jacob could not see. The children noticed. Lily asked if Nayland was sick. Thomas asked if she was angry with them. Even Sarah seemed confused by the change, clinging more tightly, as if afraid Nayland might vanish the way her mother had vanished. Only Samuel understood. What Jacob did not know was that Samuel had been preparing for something else entirely. Every night after the house went dark, the boy would slip out to the barn. There, in the cold and the silence, he practiced, drawing the hunting rifle, aiming at shadows, imagining Apache warriors where there were only fence posts and hay bales. He had made himself a promise the day his mother died. When he was old enough, when he was skilled enough, he would find the men who had killed her. He would make them pay. The rifle had become an extension of his body. His hands no longer shook when he raised it. His breathing steadied automatically. His eye found targets in the dark. He was becoming what he needed to be, a hunter, a killer. But tonight, sitting on the porch listening to Nayland speak about grief and healing and the choice to build instead of destroy, Samuel felt something crack inside him, felt the weight of the rifle in his hands differently, felt the burden of vengeance like a stone around his neck. What Jacob did not know was that this conversation would save his son's life, and perhaps his soul as well. On the second night, Jacob found his son sitting on the porch in the dark, wrapped in a blanket against the cold. "Cannot sleep?" Jacob asked, settling down beside him. "Keeps thinking about things Samuel said." "What kind of things?" The boy was quiet for a long moment. "She is going to leave is not she, Nayland. She is going back to her people." "I do not know," Jacob admitted. "That is her choice to make." "I thought I wanted her gone," Samuel said quietly. "When she first came, I hated her. I hated that you let her stay. I hated that she was Apache. I hated that she was alive when Mama was dead. But now—" He trailed off, his voice catching. "Now," Jacob prompted gently, "now I do not want her to go, and I do not know what that means. Am I betraying Mama by caring about Nayland? Am I being disloyal?" Jacob put his arm around his son's shoulders. "Your mother would never want you to close your heart because of what happened to her. She believed people could change. She believed in second chances. That is why she helped Nayland at the fort. That is why she would be glad you are learning to see past your anger. But Nayland is Apache," Samuel said. "The same people who killed Mama. Nayland is one person. She is not responsible for what others did any more than you are responsible for what other white men have done. Your mother understood that. That is why she treated Nayland with kindness instead of hate." Samuel nodded slowly, processing this. "If she goes, what happens to us? The house is finally starting to feel like a home again. Lily is singing. Thomas is not fighting every day. Even I feel less angry. If Nayland leaves, will it all fall apart?" "I hope not," Jacob said. "But I cannot promise anything. All we can do is take it one day at a time." They sat in silence, father and son, watching the stars wheel overhead, each lost in their own thoughts. On the morning of the third day, Nayland rose before dawn, as always, but this time she did not start breakfast. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table with Ella's recipe book open in front of her, her fingers tracing the handwritten words as if trying to read some hidden message in the loops and curves of Ella's script. Jacob found her there when he came downstairs. "Could not sleep?" he asked. "I kept thinking about what your wife told me the last time I saw her," Nayland said, without looking up. "She said that home was not a place but a choice, that you could carry your past with you without being trapped by it, that the bravest thing anyone could do was to choose their own path instead of following the one others laid out for them." She looked up at Jacob, her eyes red from crying or lack of sleep or both. "I think she was trying to tell me something, trying to prepare me for a moment like this. But I did not understand then. I was still too trapped in my own pain to hear what she was really saying. And now, do you understand now? I think so. I think she was saying that I get to decide who I am, not the soldiers who took me, not the people who kept me prisoner, not my father's memory or my people's expectations. Just me. My choice. And what do you choose?" Before Nayland could answer, the sound of hoofbeats outside made them both look toward the window. Goyakla had returned exactly as promised, sitting tall on his horse, waiting. But he was not alone. Behind him rode 3 other Apache warriors, younger men with hard faces and weapons clearly visible. And behind them, led by ropes, were 2 horses carrying supplies, and what looked like gifts, blankets, food, tools, the things a community would send to honor one of their own, to welcome her home. This was not just a summons, this was a delegation, a formal request from her people. Nayland stood slowly, her face pale but composed. She closed the recipe book and placed her hand flat on its cover as if drawing strength from the connection to Ella. "I need to speak to them," she said. "I am coming with you." "No, this must be between me and my people." "You understand that?" Yes, Jacob wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes. She was not asking for permission. She was telling him how it would be. He nodded reluctantly. Nalin walked out onto the porch. The Apache warriors watched her approach, their faces impassive. Goyakla dismounted and stood waiting, his posture formal and respectful. They spoke in Apache for a long time. Jacob could not understand the words, but he could read the emotion in Nalin's voice, in her gestures. She was explaining something, defending something, pleading for something. Upstairs he heard movement. The children were waking, drawn by the sound of voices. Samuel appeared first, then Thomas, then Lily with Sarah in her arms. "What is happening?" Lily whispered, her voice frightened. "Nalin is talking to her people," Jacob said quietly. "Is she leaving?" The little girl's eyes filled with tears. "Is she going away like Mama?" "I do not know, sweetheart." They watched from the window as the conversation continued. One of the younger warriors grew animated, his voice rising, his gestures sharp and aggressive. Goyakla spoke to him sharply, a clear command, and the young man subsided, but his face remained angry. Finally, Nalin turned and walked back to the house. Her face was unreadable, but Jacob saw the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She came inside and looked at all of them. Jacob, Samuel, Thomas, Lily, holding Sarah, the family she had helped piece back together. "They have asked me to return," she said quietly. "My people need someone who can speak to the white soldiers, who can negotiate for peace. They believe I am that person. They have brought gifts to honor me. They have promised me a place of respect in the tribe." Lily began to cry silently, tears streaming down her face. Thomas looked down at his feet. Samuel's jaw was clenched tight. Sarah reached out toward Nalin, saying "Nana, Nana," in her small, confused voice. But Nalin continued, "I have told them no." Jacob felt his heart skip a beat. "What I told them, that I am grateful for the honor, that I will always carry my Apache blood with pride, but that my path lies here now, that I have found a new family, a new purpose, that I am needed here as much as I would be needed there, and that I choose to stay." "Goyakla will not be happy about that," Jacob said. "He is not," Nalin confirmed. "He says I am turning my back on my people, choosing the enemy over my own blood. He says I will be declared dead to the tribe, that I will never be welcome in Apache lands again. And you are willing to accept that, to give up any chance of going back." Nalin looked at the children, at their hopeful, frightened faces. Then she looked at Jacob. "I am not giving up anything. I am choosing something. Your wife taught me that. She taught me that family is not just blood. It is the people you choose to love, to care for, to stand beside, even when it is hard. I choose this family. I choose this home." Lily let out a sob of relief and ran to Nalin, wrapping her arms around the woman's waist. Sarah struggled free from Lily's arms and toddled over, demanding to be picked up. Nalin lifted her, holding the toddler close, tears finally spilling down her own cheeks. Thomas stepped forward hesitantly. "You really want to stay with us?" "Yes," Nalin said, "if you will have me." "We will," Thomas said firmly. "We need you." Samuel was the last to approach. He stood before Nalin, this 14-year-old boy, who had been forced to grow up too fast, who had carried too much anger and pain for too long. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying, for not giving up on us. You are worth staying for," Nalin said. "All of you." There was a sharp knock on the door. When Jacob opened it, Goyakla stood there, his face like carved stone. "She has made her choice," the old warrior said. "It is the wrong choice, but it is hers to make. I ask one thing only. Let me speak to her alone." One last time, Jacob looked at Nalin. She nodded and followed Goyakla outside, down the steps, away from the house, to where the other warriors waited with the horses. Jacob watched from the porch, Samuel at his side. They saw Goyakla speaking earnestly, saw Nalin shaking her head, saw the old warrior place his hand over his heart in a gesture that looked like both blessing and goodbye. Then he reached into his saddlebag and withdrew something, placing it in Nalin's hands. She looked down at it, and even from a distance, Jacob saw her body sag, saw her raise the object to her face. The warriors mounted their horses. Goyakla gave Nalin one last long look, then turned and rode away, the others following. They did not look back. Nalin stood alone in the snow, holding whatever Goyakla had given her, her shoulders shaking. Jacob walked out to her, giving her space to compose herself, but making his presence known. When she finally turned, he saw what she held, a small medicine bag, worn leather, decorated with beads and quill work, the kind Apache mothers made for their children to carry as protection. "It was my mother's Nalin," said her voice broken. "Goyakla kept it all these years. He said she would want me to have it, even if I have chosen to walk a different path. He said it will remind me where I came from, so I do not forget who I am." That was kind of him. He also said something else, a warning. What warning? That the world is changing fast, that the old ways are dying, that soon there will be no more Apache, no more war, no more free tribes in the desert. He said I may have chosen safety by staying here, but I have also chosen to be a ghost, not fully Apache anymore, not fully white, something in between belonging to neither world. And how do you feel about that? Nalin clutched the medicine bag to her chest, frightened, sad, but also free. For the first time in 12 years, I have made a choice that is truly mine, not forced by soldiers or survival or obligation. Mine. That has to mean something. It means everything Jacob said. They stood in silence for a moment, then Jacob cleared his throat. "There is something else I need to talk to you about, something that has been brought to my attention." "What is it?" "My sister-in-law, Ella's sister Clara, has been in town. She has been talking to people, asking questions about you, about how the children are being raised. She has never approved of me, has always thought I was not good enough for Ella. And now that you are here, an Apache woman raising her sister's children, she has found ammunition." "What kind of ammunition?" Jacob took a breath. "She is filing a petition with the territorial court. She wants custody of my children. She is claiming that I am unfit, that I have put them in danger by hiring you, that they would be better off in a proper home with proper education and proper white supervision." Nalin went very still. "When the hearing is in 2 weeks, in Cheyenne. Then I will leave," Nalin said immediately. "I will go before the hearing. I will not be the reason you lose your children." "No," Jacob said firmly. "You will not leave. We will fight this together. You are part of this family now. You do not run when things get hard. But if I am the problem, you are not the problem. Clara is the problem. Her prejudice is the problem. The law that allows her to think she has more right to my children than I do, that is the problem. You are the solution. You are what is holding this family together." "But if the judge, then we will deal with it," Jacob said. "But we will deal with it together, all of us, as a family." Nalin looked at him, and something shifted in her expression, something deeper than gratitude, something that made Jacob's heart beat faster. "Why are you doing this? Why are you risking so much for me?" "Because," Jacob said, and then stopped. Because he did not know how to put into words what he was feeling. Because somewhere along the way, Nalin had stopped being just the cook. She had become essential. She had become family. She had become something more, something he was not ready to name, but could no longer deny. "Because it is the right thing to do," he finished lamely. Nalin smiled, small and sad and knowing. "You are a terrible liar, Jacob Turner." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Jacob hired a lawyer from Cheyenne, a man named Marcus Finch, who specialized in family law. Finch was optimistic but realistic. Cases like this were difficult. Judges tended to favor blood relatives, especially wealthy, respectable women like Clara, over struggling ranchers with unconventional households. But Finch had an idea. Get the children to write letters to the judge, in their own words. Tell him why they want to stay with their father. Tell him what Miss Hayes means to them. Judges are human. They have hearts. Sometimes a child's testimony carries more weight than any legal argument. So they sat down, all four children, and wrote. Samuel's letter was short and direct. Thomas's was messy but passionate. Lily's was decorated with drawings of the family, all six of them holding hands. Sarah was too young to write, but Lily helped her make handprints on paper, one for each member of the family. Nayland read the letters and wept. On the morning of the hearing, they all rode into Cheyenne together. The town was bigger than Jacob remembered, louder, more crowded. Buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high. Wagons and horses filled the streets. People stared as they passed at the rancher with his 4 children and the Apache woman riding alongside them. The courthouse was an imposing structure of stone and wood designed to make people feel small and insignificant before the power of the law. Jacob felt that smallness as they climbed the steps, felt the weight of what was at stake. Inside, they were directed to a courtroom on the 2nd floor. Clara was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table, with her lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit. She looked at Jacob with something like pity, looked at Nalin with something like disgust, and looked at the children with something that might have been love, or might have been possessiveness, or might have been both. The judge entered, an older man with white hair and a stern face. Judge William Hartford, according to the nameplate on his desk. He surveyed the courtroom with the weary expression of someone who had seen too much human foolishness and expected to see more today. The hearing began. Clara's lawyer painted a picture of neglect and danger. Children living in squalor with an alcoholic father and a savage housekeeper. Children exposed to violence and primitive influences. Children who deserved better, who needed the civilizing influence of a proper home with proper education and proper moral guidance. Jacob's lawyer countered with character witnesses. The school teacher, Mrs. Henderson, who testified that the Turner children had improved dramatically in recent weeks. The local doctor who confirmed they were healthy and well cared for. The minister who spoke of Jacob's devotion to his family. But Clara's lawyer had saved his strongest attack for last. He called Nalin to the stand. She walked forward, calmly placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Clara's lawyer circled her like a wolf circling prey. Miss Hayes, is it true that you are Apache? Yes. Is it true that Apache warriors killed Ella Turner? Yes. Is it true that your own brother led the raid that killed her? Nayland went very still. Jacob saw her hands clench in her lap. I do not know who led the raid, she said carefully. But it is possible my brother was involved. He died 2 weeks after Ella's death, killed by cavalry soldiers. So the man who murdered these children's mother might have been your own blood, and yet you live in their home, cook their food, care for them. I did not kill Ella Turner, Nayland said, her voice steady despite the assault. I loved her. She was kind to me when no one else was. I am here because I owe her a debt, because I want to help her children, not harm them. But you are Apache. Your people are at war with ours. How can these children trust you? How can Mr. Turner trust you? They trust me because I have earned that trust, because I have cared for them with my whole heart, because I would die to protect them. Noble words, the lawyer said with a sneer. But words are easy, actions matter. And the action here is clear. You are an enemy living among us, corrupting innocent children with your savage ways. Objection, Finch shouted, rising to his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, the judge said mildly. Mr. Collins, keep your rhetoric in check. But the damage was done. Jacob saw the way the judge was looking at Nayland, saw the calculation in his eyes. An Apache woman in a white household. It did not matter how well she had performed her duties. It did not matter that the children loved her. In the eyes of the law, in the eyes of society, she was a problem. The judge called a recess. They filed out of the courtroom into the hallway. Clara approached, her face carefully composed. Jacob, she said, this does not have to be difficult. give me the children. Let me raise them properly. You can visit, of course. But they need stability. They need a woman's influence." "They have a woman's influence," Jacob said, nodding toward Nayland. "An Apache woman." Clara said, her lip curling. "Is that really what Ella would want? Her children raised by one of the savages who killed her." "Ella would want her children loved," Jacob said. "That is exactly what Nayland does. She loves them. She has devoted herself to them. That is more than I can say for you. Where were you when Ella died? Where were you when we needed help? You did not come until you saw an opportunity to take what was not yours." "The children are my blood," Clara said coldly. "That makes them mine more than hers." Samuel stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "We are not yours," he said clearly. "We belong with our father, with Nayland, with our family. You can tell the judge whatever you want, but we will tell him the truth. And the truth is that we want to stay where we are." Clara looked at her nephew, and something flickered in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition that she had lost before the fight had even really begun. "You will regret this," she said quietly. "All of you." The hearing resumed. The judge called for the children's letters to be read aloud. Finch read them in a clear voice, and Jacob saw the judge's expression soften as he listened to his children's words. Samuel wrote, "Nayland saved us when we were drowning. She gave us back our home. If you take us away from her, you take away the only mother we have left." Thomas wrote, "She is teaching me to be better, to use my anger for good things instead of bad things. I do not want to lose her." Lily wrote, "She sings Mama's songs and new songs too. She makes me feel safe. Please do not make her go away." When the reading was finished, the judge sat back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Mr. Turner," he said, "I need you to understand something. This court does not take the removal of children from their father lightly, but it also does not take lightly the introduction of potentially dangerous influences into a child's life. Miss Hayes may be a good cook and a good housekeeper, but she is also Apache, and we are at war with the Apache." Jacob stood. "Your Honor, with respect, we are not at war with Miss Hayes. She was taken from her people 12 years ago. She has lived among us, worked for us, served us faithfully. She had nothing to do with my wife's death. Punishing her for the actions of other Apache is like punishing all white men for the crimes of a few." The judge raised an eyebrow. "A fair point. But Mrs. Brennan also raises valid concerns about stability and propriety." "Then let me tell you about propriety, Your Honor. My wife Ella befriended Miss Hayes at Fort Laramie. She taught her. She cared for her. She saw in her what I have come to see. A good woman who has survived terrible things and is trying to build something better. If Ella were here, she would be standing beside Miss Hayes, not condemning her. And I will not dishonor my wife's memory by turning away someone she valued." The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Nayland. "Miss Hayes, why do you stay? You could leave. You could go back to your people. Why remain here where you are clearly not universally welcome?" Nayland stood, her voice clear and strong. "I stay because I have found something I thought I had lost forever. Your honor, a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up each morning and believe that the world is not entirely cruel. The Turner children have given me as much as I have given them. They have reminded me that healing is possible, that love can exist even in the shadow of great loss. I stay because leaving would break my heart. And theirs." The judge nodded slowly. Then he looked at Clara. "Mrs. Brennan, I appreciate your concern for your sister's children. But I must ask you a question. When Ella was alive, how often did you visit this family?" Clara's face tightened. "Not often. The ranch is far from town. And after she died—" "How often did you come to help?" I offered, Clara said defensively. "Jacob refused my help." "Because you wanted to take the children away, not help raise them," Jacob said. The judge held up a hand for silence. He sat for a long moment, the courtroom utterly quiet. everyone waiting for the words that would determine the fate of this family. Finally, he spoke. "I have heard enough. In the matter of custody, this court finds that the children should remain with their father. Mr. Turner has demonstrated that he is providing adequate care, that his household is stable, and that his children are thriving under current circumstances. Mrs. Brennan's petition is denied." The judge paused, then looked directly at Nayland. "Miss Hayes, I must tell you something. 20 years ago, I was Lieutenant William Hartford, stationed at Fort Laramie. I knew your people. I knew your father, Cochilo Negro. I was there the day he negotiated for your release, and I was there when he was killed in the ambush that followed." The courtroom went silent. "I also knew your brother, the one who led the raid that killed Mrs. Turner. But I also know that 3 months before that raid, your brother saved 5 white children from a Comanche attack near the Pecos River. He carried a wounded girl on his horse for 2 days to get her to a doctor. She lived because of him." He looked at Clara, then at Jacob. "War makes monsters of us all. But it also reveals that even in our darkest moments, we are capable of unexpected grace. Miss Hayes has shown that grace. She has earned her place in this family." Clara made a sound like she had been struck. Her lawyer started to object, but the judge cut him off. "However," he continued, "I do have concerns about the long-term stability of this arrangement. Miss Hayes, while clearly devoted to the children, has no legal standing in this family. She could leave at any time. For the children's sake, for their emotional security, I strongly recommend that you formalize this arrangement." "What does that mean?" Jacob asked. "It means, Mr. Turner, that if you value Miss Hayes' presence in your home and in your children's lives, you should give her a legal reason to stay. Make her family in law, as she has become family in spirit." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Jacob felt his face flush. Was the judge suggesting what he thought he was suggesting? The judge banged his gavel. "This hearing is concluded. I wish you all well." He stood and left the courtroom, leaving behind a chaos of emotion. Clara gathered her things and swept out without another word, her lawyer trailing behind her. The children crowded around Jacob and Nayland, talking excitedly, not fully understanding what had just happened, but knowing they had won. Finch approached Jacob with a small smile. "Well, that was unexpected. But you should consider the judge's suggestion seriously. It would provide legal protection for Miss Hayes and stability for the children." He tipped his hat and left. Jacob turned to find Nayland standing alone by the window looking out at the street below. He walked over to her. "We won," he said quietly. "Yes, for now." "What do you mean?" "I mean that the judge was right. I have no legal standing here. I am an employee who could be dismissed at any time. The children have no guarantee that I will stay, neither do you, so do not leave." Nayland turned to face him. "Even if I wanted to, Jacob, I am always going to be a problem. I am Apache in a world that hates Apache. I am unmarried and living in your home, which makes people talk. I am the target that people like Clara will always aim at when they want to hurt you." "Then we give them nothing to aim at," Jacob said. "How? By making you family, really family, the way the judge suggested." Nayland stared at him. "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I am asking you to marry me," Jacob said, the words tumbling out before he could lose his nerve. "Not because I am trying to replace Ella. Not because you are convenient or useful, but because somewhere along the way you became essential. Because I look forward to seeing you every morning. Because my children need you, and if I am being honest, so do I. Because when I think about the future, you are in it, always." Nayland's eyes filled with tears. "Jacob, I cannot replace her. I am not asking you to. Ella will always be part of this family, her memory, her love. But there is room for more love, room for you, if you want it. What about your children? What about Samuel? Let us ask them." Jacob turned and called the children over. They came crowding around, curious and excited. "Kids, I need to ask you something important. How would you feel if Nayland became a permanent part of our family, if she married me and became your stepmother?" Lily's face lit up like sunrise. Really, really, Jacob confirmed. Yes, 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 Lily said, jumping up and down. Thomas grinned. Does that mean she can never leave? That is exactly what it means, Jacob said. Then yes, Thomas said firmly. Sarah, not understanding, but sensing the excitement, clapped her hands and shouted, Nana, stay! All eyes turned to Samuel. The boy stood quiet, his face unreadable. Then slowly he smiled. Mama would like it, he said. She would want someone to take care of us, to take care of Pa. And she liked you, Nalin. She told me once that you were special, that you had survived so much and still had kindness in your heart. I think she would be happy about this. Nalin was crying openly now. Jacob took her hand. So, what do you say? Will you marry me? Will you be part of this family, officially? Nalin looked at Jacob, at the children, at the life they were offering her, a life she had never imagined possible, a life built on ashes and grief, but growing toward something beautiful. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. The children erupted in cheers. Lily hugged Nalin. Thomas punched the air in triumph. Samuel smiled, really smiled for the first time in months. Sarah demanded to be picked up, and Nalin lifted her, holding the toddler close while the little girl patted her face and said, Mama, Mama, in her sweet, certain voice. And this time, Nalin did not correct her. 6 weeks later, in early February, on a morning when the first signs of thaw began to show, with snow falling gently from a white sky, they gathered in the small church in Cheyenne. The same minister who had testified at the hearing performed the ceremony. Mrs. Henderson was there, wiping tears from her eyes. Some of the ranch hands Jacob had worked with over the years came to witness. Even Finch, the lawyer, attended, looking pleased with himself. The children stood as attendants, all dressed in their Sunday best. Lily held a bouquet of dried flowers she had arranged herself. Thomas and Samuel stood proud and tall, one on each side of their father. Sarah, wearing a new white dress, tottered between them, occasionally wandering toward Nalin with reaching hands. Nalin wore a simple dress, white with blue embroidery, a combination of white tradition and Apache design. Around her neck she wore her mother's medicine bag, alongside a silver locket Jacob had given her, a locket that held a photograph of all 6 of them together. The ceremony was short and simple. Jacob spoke his vows with a steady voice, promising to honor and cherish, to build a life together, to be a partner in all things. Nalin spoke hers with tears in her eyes, promising to love his children as her own, to honor Ella's memory, to be faithful to this new family she had found. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the children cheered. Jacob kissed Nalin gently, and she kissed him back. And in that moment, something that had been broken for so long finally felt whole again. After the ceremony, they returned to the ranch. Night fell early, and snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white silence. They built a fire in the hearth and gathered around it, all 6 of them, a family complete at last. Lily sang her voice clear and sweet, a song that was part lullaby, part prayer, part celebration. Thomas told stories that made everyone laugh. Samuel played the harmonica their mother had given him years ago, the notes wavering but heartfelt. Sarah clapped along, delighted by the music and the warmth and the joy that filled the house. Nalin sat beside Jacob on the old sofa, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat steady and sure, the rhythm of a life continuing, of hope renewed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The frontier was still dangerous. The wars between white settlers and native tribes were far from over. There would be people who judged them, who condemned their union, who saw only the Apache woman and not the devoted mother and wife. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight there was only warmth and love, and the simple miracle of survival transformed into something beautiful. Jacob looked down at Nalin, at his children gathered around the fire, at the home they had built together from the ruins of grief. "Welcome home," he whispered. Nalin smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were good tears now, healing tears. "I am home," she said. "Finally, truly home. And outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the scars of the past, making the world new again, giving them all a chance to begin once more. A chance to love, a chance to heal, a chance to prove that even in the darkest times, even across the deepest divides, family was not defined by blood or history or the wounds we carry, but by the choices we make, the love we give, and the courage to believe that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. The Turner family had found that courage, and in finding it, they had found each other.